light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Xenia Grant, who is a person with high-functioning autism who has also accomplished a degree in political science and helped to organize and educate regarding autism, even being one of the people who started the Autism Network International, all sorts of different things. But the subject we wanted to address today was bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
Autism, to me, is just a different way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
The two main perspectives seem to be that either it's a condition where we think differently, or it's a problem, something that has to be cured. So we're looking for treatments to prevent autism or to eradicate it or to somehow make it invisible.
Absolutely, understood.
And I'm not sure that's a helpful approach, but the bureaucracy of our current world seems to be more on that side than on the side of it being a condition.
Understood. And not only that, but the bureaucracy complicates things. And not only that, but people who deal with the bureaucracy really should not do it themselves. They always need help in that because it's so complex.
You mean autistic people needing help to deal with the bureaucracy?
Even non-autistic people dealing with the bureaucracy, it's so complex that you need help dealing with it.
Okay. But it only gets worse for... The thing with bureaucracy, by its very nature, going back to your political science degree,
Yes.
it's an attempt to create a unified or uniform system
Yes.
so that you can treat every person exactly the same.
Absolutely.
One form for everybody.
Absolutely.
The problem with one-size-fits-all answers is that they don't really fit anybody.
They don't, but they're thinking, we got to deal with millions of people. We're a country of a population of over 300 million, and we have to deal with millions of people, and they don't look at the specifics or look at the generalities, so everything can be the same. So if you're from Alaska or Hawaii or what have, everything has to be the same, and what they forget is that a lot of us on the autism spectrum, when we deal with bureaucracy, it is a nightmare.
Because they're asking for a generality that I can't satisfy.
And not only that, but it's almost a prove it to me that you have. And then you fill in the blank to prove whatever they want.
Well, and then you'd have to find someone whose opinion they respect.
Absolutely.
Such as a licensed clinical psychologist. You
Or
may know you have autism, but until one of the people whom we've approved validates that you have autism, we're not going to regard you as actually having it.
Absolutely.
I knew that I had it from day one because I was experiencing all the problems of not being able to communicate effectively.
And not only that, but many of us who try to get these diagnoses, it costs money, and a lot of us don't have the money to get the diagnosis in the first place unless you go through voc rehab where they pay for it, or other means of...
Well, and even the vocational rehabilitation organization will only pay for it if they see something in your interaction or behavior that really, really convinces them this must be so. For someone with high-functioning autism, that is that much harder to prove.
And not only that much harder to prove, but if you're a woman on the spectrum, women present differently, and so it makes it even harder.
Am I remembering correctly that initially there were some people who thought that autism was purely a male condition?
Yes, and the reason why is because the males are more obvious with it, and the models that they used historically, even in the year 2014, have been males and not females.
So they're not using as many women in the research studies.
That's right. But it's interesting that the books that have come out written by people who have autism, majority are women.
Okay. A lot of the authors.
A lot of the authors. There are a few male authors mixed in there.
Does that mean that the men aren't writing books or that they're not being recognized when they do?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, it's one more way that the autistic mind sees the details of saying
Absolutely.
which is it. The hardest question still for me to answer is when someone comes up to me and says, "How are you?"
And
It sends my mind into a total tailspin because I can think of no less than 15 ways to answer the question in the first half second.
And with me, to me, it's a general question. They really don't care how you're doing. I just say fine as a response. Okay, fine.
So I feel like I'm being dishonest if I say fine and I'm not.
And I understood, but unfortunately, in this society, people half the time don't really want an honest answer.
Yeah. Which the way I chose to deal with that is that if someone comes up to me and says, "Hi, how are you?" I wait 5 or 10 seconds and I only answer if they're still standing in front of me. Because
Interesting.
very often after 5 or 10 seconds, if I don't answer, if I don't say a word, they're already gone.
Okay.
They walk on to the next thing in their day, and because they didn't want the answer anyway, and
Understood.
if they don't stand there long enough to hear it, then I guess I didn't need to give it.
And talking about bureaucracy, I remember, let me tell you this story. I have SSDI and I got it in the year 2002.
Okay.
But in trying to get SSDI, my advocate helped me with it. They ask questions that have nothing to do with the subject matter, like, were you in an internment camp because you were of Japanese ancestry during World War II? It's like, okay, what does that have to do
And where did that question come from?
And I mean, it's like, first of all, I was born in 1965. And secondly,
So you couldn't have been there.
but so the bureaucracy, a lot of us who deal with this kind of bureaucracy, I mean, I just tell people when I advise them, just look as incompetent and act as incompetent as possible. And that's the only way you can get it, because in this country, it's so hard to get the benefits, the services, because it's a prove it to me that you have it system.
Well, and for the person with high functioning autism, it's that much more difficult because if you're too high functioning, they assume that you couldn't possibly have autism in the first place.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was, well, this is rather off the subject, but it was like the time I went to an emergency room and I reported my level of pain, but the doctor refused to do anything because he simply didn't believe me because I wasn't laying on the floor screaming. It's okay if I lay on the floor and scream, well, then will you believe me?
Well, not only that, but we do feel our pain tolerances are different.
Yeah.
And that is
I find that mine's much higher.
Mine is much higher, and that is a totally different subject
Yeah.
than dealing with the mindless bureaucracy that we all have to deal
Well,
with.
it's different, but it's relevant because the bureaucracy wants to see your pain
Absolutely.
and see your need
Absolutely.
and make it really, really obvious to me that you have a
Absolutely.
problem, or I'm
Absolutely.
simply not going to believe you.
Absolutely. It's a prove it to me that you have it system.
And the thing that makes it challenging in that regard is that autism, by its very nature, is essentially an internal condition.
An internal condition, yet it does have external, if people see someone behaving differently, or if people see obvious motor problems and the apraxia and the dyspraxia and
Well, but they frequently make the assumption that if it's an external action, that it's something you could just decide to control.
and that may not necessarily be the case.
Not without enormous amounts of effort.
And energy.
Yeah, and energy.
And energy.
When I get really stressed, sometimes I'll put my hands up and squeeze the sides of my head. And it helps me to get grounded and focused. But for anyone who doesn't know what that means or why I'm doing it, it looks totally strange, and they don't understand why I'm doing it or what it means or anything else.
I mean,
But it's an indication of an internal struggle.
like with me, when I go to doctor's appointments and all that, because I'm a coward that needs catering too,
Okay?
I bring my map. Well, lately it's been Argentina, but I brought my map of Kazakhstan with me too. Most people in their middle ages don't do that.
So you ground yourself by looking at maps of other countries.
Yeah. Or, I just have it and I fiddle with it or whatever. But,
So some of the lower functioning autistics will actually rock back and forth in their
Yes.
chairs.
yeah. Or make certain noises or or pace back and forth. It differs on the person and the level of comfort and how far out of the routine it is.
Mhm. I saw one television show where, or it was a movie where somebody was, in order to ground his thoughts, he would focus on numbers
Yeah,
and start doing calculations in his head.
yeah.
And something about the process of working with the numbers mentally allowed everything else to find a structure that allowed
Yeah.
him to function.
Well, and not only that, but in this society, especially in dealing with bureaucracy, everything is based on appearances. Yeah.
Yeah, very much based on appearances.
So if you don't look it, or you, I mean,
Well, and it presumes a structure that may not be appropriate to the person.
absolutely,
You
absolutely.
know, that when you hear somebody say, well, in this situation, everybody would, of course, and I just say, no, there is no of course, and there is no everybody. It's, you may have observed most people doing this, but there again, it gets really difficult to pin down, because if you change someone's social environment, they will see a different slice of humanity.
Absolutely, and not only that, but with with us on the spectrum, when we're trying to get this help and all that, we may not know where to go, how to go about it, who to go to. I mean, and it's so dysfunctional in this country that you just can't go to one place. You're almost, it's like a pinball on a pinball machine.
Yeah,
And-
because all the people you have to talk to aren't talking to each other.
No one's talking to each other. They don't even realize that the other guy exists.
But in order to get one's needs met as an autistic person, these people have to function as a team within your life, even though they don't even know each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of us who deal with this bureaucracy and trying to get help, whether it's SSDI or vocational rehab or getting a diagnosis, it's difficult.
Well, and you also have to be aware of what perspective within the spectrum, with which perspective you're interfacing. Whether you're dealing with a clinical psychologist who thinks autism is a problem to be cured, or a clinical psychologist who thinks that autism is a different way of thinking that provides unique advantages. I mean, we have exceptional attention to detail. We're very focused on our work. We don't wander off and do something else. We don't waste time on the clock. We tend to, be more honest, more hardworking, more dedicated. I mean, in my case, someone when asked me if I was aware of being compulsively honest, and I kind of laughed when they said that, because I hadn't heard it described that way before. But I do find that if something feels dishonest to me, it creates enormous anxiety if I'm supposed to go through and do it anyway.
And not only that, but with dealing with the bureaucracy and all that, you have to really act dumb. And for someone
Okay.
who is, because
what I kept finding out, and I think this is what you're leading to, is that I'm not bad enough to qualify for help, and I'm not good enough to manage on my own.
absolutely, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And so you have to act like you're really dumb and don't understand what the hell they're talking about, because you might as well act like they're speaking Klingon to you.
Well, and I poked around on the internet a little bit trying to
Yes.
find statistics, and I couldn't really find anything that was really hard and fast, but it seemed like most of them were kind of pointing in the direction of up to 90% of people with high-functioning autism being unemployed, simply because the employer always finds them just a little bit quirky somehow.
Well, what it is that they're looking. What it is that they're not looking at the person. They're looking, in capitalism, they only care about if you're productive and if you make money. They're not, they don't want.
Well, and I think an autistic person can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
But it may, there was one employer who was reporting on the effect it had on the company after they hired people with high-functioning autism. And they said it was really quite amazing, but quite wonderful, that they had to change the way the whole department communicated. And they found themselves being more honest, more direct, more clear. They didn't beat around the bush. They didn't throw in all kinds of extraneous detail that didn't matter. Conversation became much more succinct, much more concise. Their sarcasm and other use of idioms dropped. people weren't making statements as much that
Mm-hmm.
in which the statement doesn't mean what you what the
Absolutely.
words say.
Mm-hmm.
When I have to explain this to people, I always say it's kind of like the expression, I ran into Joe downtown,
Mm-hmm.
and the non-autistic person would say, oh, that's nice. Did you go to lunch or something?
Mm-hmm.
The non-autistic person. The autistic person, when they hear I ran into Joe downtown, would say, oh my God, did you get hurt?
Understood. Understood. And
Did you run into Joe or did you meet Joe?
yeah. I mean, and when dealing with the bureaucracy, because some of the questions that they ask, but like when I tried to get SSDI, over 10 years ago, I mean, they are, it's based on, if you look at, it's, in this society, if you look absolutely incompetent, it's a very vicious system.
Mhm.
And a lot of us have
But
a hard
even with that, even if you look completely incompetent, bureaucracy is still going to say, do we have a program for you?
Absolutely.
Because the wake-up call to the rest of the population that autism and perhaps every disability raises is whether, in fact, we have a system that is effective at taking care of us.
And the answer is no. In America today, no.
Yeah. And, well, that's another conversation for
Absolutely.
another time also, because we are going to address autism in other countries at some point. But it's just such a broad, complicated topic. And having two autistics here, we're bouncing from detail to detail.
Absolutely.
And trying to maintain a common thread. But,
Absolutely.
but hopefully everybody finds
I mean, but a
something
lot
helpful
of
in the
us,
show.
who deal with the bureaucracy, first of all, it's intimidating.
Yeah.
Second,
Well, I find it intimidating because most of the time I don't know what they mean.
and not only that, but you have to bring a whole bunch of paperwork especially the income proof stuff. I mean, it's all based on how much money you make. It's all based on, this thing and that thing, and that may not have anything to do with the problem at hand.
Yeah. I think there's something really dehumanizing, as autistic or not, something very dehumanizing about seeing a person as nothing more than a potential dollar sign.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, in this society, they do that. I think all bureaucracies do that, but it just, I mean, it's a belief system.
You could look at it as suddenly this is not a multidimensional person.
Yeah,
This is an expense.
and that's how they view it.
Or if for those few companies who have been willing to try having employees with high-functioning autism, the person could become a resource.
Yes.
And it could actually be empowering because
Absolutely.
by having the autistic person there, suddenly everyone on the team is interacting more efficiently by using
Absolutely.
clearer language.
Absolutely.
But also because of our extreme attention to detail, putting a person with high-functioning autism in your research department or your quality assurance department, they're going to catch more things before they get out the door than their neurotypical counterparts.
That is a possibility. And not only that, but there's always exceptions to the rule, and I think bureaucracy doesn't always account for that because they don't want to account for it. And when
It gives them more work to do, but I think it's worth it.
of course but you got to remember that when you look at everything as, is it a burden rather than how can we help these people to be better and to contribute to the greater cause of the country,
Yeah, the greater good.
the greater good.
Well, it's learning to really work as a team.
Yeah.
And that, I don't want to say even the autistic person, but that every person on the team has something to contribute.
Everybody does. I mean, it's like a football team, and you don't have a quarterback, or you don't have your cornerbacks, or you don't have your
Well,
placekeeper.
even the people who are blocking on the line.
Absolutely.
It takes all the members of the team in order for it to work.
Yeah, and
Bureaucracy, in order to create this uniform approach, this system, this process, tries to give everybody the same questions, and sometimes it'll even be multiple choice.
yeah,
You have 4 possible answers, and if one of them isn't none of the above, I stare at the question and I don't know what to do with it, because anything I check would be a lie.
understood. And the thing is that then then add on top of that that our system expects people to lie anyway. That's why people can game the system and all that, because if you're totally honest, they really don't want you anyway.
In experience, I find that more often than I'd like, but it's problematic because, on one hand, if you lie on a job application, for example, I've been told that if I don't lie, I won't get hired.
Yeah.
But if I do lie, one of the last statements on the application says that if we ever find out anything on this form is false, you can be fired without cause.
Yes, yes.
So either you can be fired without cause and get the job, or you can be totally honest and not get the job.
Yeah.
Either way, you're walking on thin ice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It makes me wonder if bureaucracy is a certain sloppiness, a certain wrong choice.
Curse of the Pharaohs.
I'm not sure I understand that expression.
Oh, it's in ancient Egyptian times they called bureaucracy the curse of the Pharaohs because it's that complex.
Okay.
And
But in that perception, then the idea was that the pharaohs were the one that created the bureaucracy?
and they expected it to be complex in the first place anyway.
Okay. I suppose there are people who would have a similar opinion in the United States today, but to me, it comes back to remembering that everyone's here for a reason. That we all have something to contribute, and it could be that the very presence and it seems like either there's more diagnosis being made, or there is actually a greater incidence of autism happening.
Or the definition has changed in the last few years, and it has changed every so often, and that needs to be taken into account too.
Yeah. Which I guess, since we're dealing with bureaucracy, brings up the very controversial, complicated subject of the DSM-5.
Yeah,
Which, for anyone who doesn't recognize that acronym to begin with, DSM is essentially a big manual of definitions and codes related to all sorts of different mental and emotional conditions.
Yeah.
Conditions. And the quirk of it, if I understand correctly, is that it was originally created not so that clinical psychologists would have a dictionary to which they could refer, but rather it was created so that the bill clerks would know what was qualified and what wasn't.
Actually, for both reasons.
For both reasons?
Yeah, because
but it had to do with billing and
some of it had to do with billing and all that, but some of it had to do with, so the psychiatrists or psychologists would have something. Oh, it's 299.05, and this is what it is. It's 310, and it's,
Yeah, it all had reference numbers to tell you which condition was which.
Absolutely,
but it doesn't confirm. It doesn't really tie in effectively with what the reality of the person is.
Not necessarily, no.
And if you then put a high price on testing.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point in time, I wondered if autism was a rich man's condition.
Well, and
because
at times,
poor men with autism couldn't find out.
And not only that, minorities with autism couldn't find out unless you were either Jewish or WASP. You couldn't find out.
Yeah. I mean, you could have autism, struggle with trying to cope with autism, but the world would not validate that you had autism or give you any help dealing with the autism because you couldn't afford a $500 or $1,000 test.
Absolutely.
That would confirm whether or not you had this condition.
Absolutely, and it's still true today.
It makes sense that any sort of reference book every so often would need to be updated.
Yeah.
When we got to the DSM-5, though, it seems that they were trying to shift the categorizations.
Well, it changed the meanings, and it got influenced politically and by the drug companies, and that.
Okay.
And so, I mean, the job that I'm at, when people order a DSM manual, it's never the DSM-5, it's always the DSM-4 that they order.
Okay.
So, I mean,
my understanding is that even the medical industry itself took one look at the DSM-5 and just said this is unusable.
I think in a way, yeah.
Because it was unwieldy, it tried to take different conditions and put them all together.
Yeah.
The problem with redefining who has a condition, who doesn't, is that there are people who would be diagnosed under the DSM-4 that would not be diagnosed under the DSM-5.
Or they change the definition and they're diagnosed with something else. And
You know, and if it's someone who has been barely surviving by utilizing the resources of the system, and this new edition comes out that says you don't have it anymore, they're basically homeless at that point because there's no way for them to interface with the system.
Can be, absolutely, absolutely. And it's made a mess of things.
Which I guess is where we come back, in the last few minutes of our show, come back to saying that ultimately we the people have to be better than our governments. We have to be better than our systems. We have to be better than our bureaucratic forms. We have to take care of each other. Because, you know, as Benjamin Franklin said, either we all hang together or we all hang separately. You know, in order to survive, it requires us working together. Bureaucracy isn't terribly concerned about that, and that's not terribly intelligent.
Understood. Understood.
Any final comments as we wind up this complicated?
It's just that a lot of us on the autism spectrum find bureaucracy daunting, complex, and just absolutely might as well be written in hieroglyphics anyway.
And yet somehow we have to deal with it. I mean, we're in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it doesn't need to be as adversarial as it is.
No, but they set it up as adversarial.
You know, well, if they set it up that way, we can still fix it.
Understood.
Because the genius of American law is that it can be changed.
Understood.
Thank you very much for everything you shared today.
Thank you. Absolutely.